talk about the democratization of Mexico, one of the first things in the early years we have to consider is how someone was willing to challenge the PRI, which had never lost. It's really a wonderful David and Goliath story, and Ernesto Ruffo is the star.
Yes, Bill, I think a lot of people don't realize that the PRI had been in power since 1929, so when Ernesto Ruffo challenged them in the state of Baja California in 1989, he became the first individual to win an opposition election as a state governor, and that set in motion a lot of other individuals believing that they really had a possibility of winning contests against the PRI in many other parts of Mexico.
I'm eager to hear his story and how he was willing to challenge this remarkably successful system.
Me too. Most students who study politics are interested in what or who attracted prominent public figures to the political world. And I know your father worked in a fish processing factory. However, your grandfather, who was from Ensenada, was a candidate as an alternate to the Chamber of Deputies back in 1920. But although the person he was running with did not win the election, he received far more votes than that individual, so he actually became the alternate to a different candidate and served in that position from Baja California. Can you tell us who or what influenced you to become politically active?
Well, I guess most of us people carry something in our blood. We inherit something on your mother and father. But on my case, it also happened that I always was worried about people. As a student, somehow I got to be the leader of the students from Baja California in Monterrey at the university. And then I always participated in different civic organizations and entrepreneurial organizations, fisheries organizations, always defending or trying to improve condition around people working on whatever. And always it was the government you were trying to move, and interest of other groups, political groups, and because you're trying to enhance whatever the environment surrounding you, then you begin being noticeable. And that then suddenly had Ruffo to be candidate to be the coordinator of students, as I said, but then it became more serious because it was about running the city in Ensenada.
During your years at Monterey Tech University, you were the president of the Baja California Students Association. Was that an opportunity for you to get to know other students from the North, and did you try and represent the views of the North in the university?
Well, I'm kind of smiling because when you're young, you want to party. And we had some traditions from the students of Baja in the university at Tech in Monterrey. But it also had a constructive way of going, which was accumulating resources for poor students to be able to pay tuition. So we were kind of doing a fund for scholarships. And today, after so many years, from that association, the biggest fund for students in the Monterrey Tech, in the city of Monterrey, is that of the state of Baja California. It began before I had to be the president, but we all, the several presidents, in a continuous effort, have made that a very lively scholarship fund. So you mix fun with responsibility, and that is good.
Yes, excellent.
After you graduated with a degree in business administration, you worked for Pesquera Zapata, a fishing company, from 1975 to 1986, rising to the position of Director General of this firm. What made you decide to join the National Action Party in 1985 and run for mayor of Ensenada? And did any particular individuals mentor you in public life, and how did they influence your attitudes and professional career?
Well, as my family background is in fisheries, I knew about boats, about nets, all of that. I did go through the business schooling, but when I got back to the family business, government had declared or nationalized several fish species and went on to socialistic ways of organizing the catch. So I suddenly had no reason in the family for work. But then an entrepreneurial association hired me as the coordinator for administrative endeavors. While then, later on, a fish meal company came into Ensenada, 50% Mexican capital, 50% American capital. So they hired me to be the personnel manager. And I began working there, but it happened that the fishermen and the workers were coming from my family's canneries. So the loyalty to me was big, and people was helping me. They were my friends. But we were paid by catching fish and processing it by the ton. Just a basic salary. So we had to move. And when you were arriving to the port with a full fish load, then the port's union would charge you unreasonable fees and not give you the right turn to your boat if you were not paying some kind of bribe. And these were government unions. So we all were mad, and we were always trying to overcome that, and as well as other very similar problems. So I began being outspoken. I began, confronting the government in court. My father was to tell me, Ernesto, don't do that. Go talk to the officials and make some kind of agreement, but don't confront them. You were not going to move forward. I was stubborn. I was young, and I kept doing it. And so the PAN, the political party, kind of moved their eyes on me while I made my career in the company, a little bit more than 10 years. So I ran up all the way to Director General. It was very interesting because being a half and half company, the owners were coming from a Texan company, Zapata Corporation, an oil dedicated company, but also had fishing operations, and Protexa from Monterrey. And there was a contrast there, the culture, American culture, Mexican culture, the way of doing business, the Mexican part trying to solve those type of problems with difficulties with government. That was their part of the deal. The American part always supporting with investment, with technology, with training, and all of those things. So I was kind of getting the best of both worlds, but there was contrast and conflict, and that made me to be the candidate to be the mayor of my fishing town, Ensenada.
You had an unusual childhood growing up in Ensenada, but your parents also sent you to the United States, to San Diego, to attend 1 year of school there. Was that instrumental in the way you've approached politics and the way you approached business during your career?
Well, first of all, I made a lot of American friends. I still keep my friends. But it also happened that in Ensenada, it's a border town. And it always gets a lot of tourism. And there is this cantina, Who's and where we are young, we depart and talk with many American friends. So I was talking cantina English. So my parents decided, as well as to all of my brothers, to send me to boarding school so I could, be better in English. But this was an Episcopal school. And you see there order, values. Naturally, my English was not that, clean shaped. So I got under detention several times. But I learned it, and so I improved my skills. And the things that I appreciate most is making friends.
When you graduated from the Monterey Institute of Technology in 1974, one of the most respected private institutions in the country, very few politicians had that experience. Do you believe your university education there exercised a significant impact on your ideas about political and economic development in Mexico, as well as on your future relationships in politics and public life?
Oh yeah, the institutions that educate you play a big influence in you. Monterrey Tech, it's open to the trend, to whatever is going on, and that makes you a person which is alike. I mean, you're open to the world. Of course, if it's a technological institute, that's a formation on you, a style of doing things. But it always enhances the value of being productive and being transparent. And that city of Monterrey has got that shape of attitude. It always surprises me, and it still does surprise me, that city, when you go on board a taxi and the driver loves their patron or the owner of given company, the traditional names of entrepreneurs that have been successful, and that is odd in the Mexican culture. Because we come from a very feudal way. When the Spaniards came, they came when Renaissance was happening in the 1500s, and Mexico was a lot of different Indian nations, different languages, different religions. So we got consolidated by the colony from the Spaniards. But this feudal way, because Spaniards came from a king, so there was a feudal organization. I think the best thing that happened was Christianity the church, los padres, the missions, and I think that is working on Mexico, but we are kind of on the normal central educational system, kind of dragging that. But it's different on northern Mexico, which was almost empty. And the few we had to fight because there is no water, there is a lot of sun, big distances, and it's easier for us, the ones in the north, to move on to the U.S. And so we kind of learn what's going on in the U.S., and that, I guess, makes Monterrey an open city with specific historic traits, because people from there also came from an expulsion of Spaniards from the king. They were said to be converted Jews to Christians, and they came as doubtful soldiers to the king, and the viceroy over here decided, oh, these guys are doubtful, so they expelled them to the desert to the north, and that's Monterrey. Maybe that's why they eat cabrito.
You were a very successful businessman in Ensenada in the fishing industry, and then you became the president of Coparmex. Could you talk a little bit about your success as a businessman, but also your involvement in this trade association?
It's a very important influence. Of course, I depart from that economy is first than politics. That's something up to debate. But why I say that is because opportunity is the key to whatever is going on in our community. If you have a community that makes more opportunity than people, then you have something that is open. Everybody's wanting to cooperate, to support each other. If you have less opportunity than people, then people is fighting over the scarce opportunities. And that's politics. At the end of the situation, politics is the art of how to share and who is going to get what. So in that ambience, an entrepreneurial association as Coparmex makes the difference. And this association actually is under the form of a union. It's not a normal association. It's conceived in the relationship between the person that is leading something to create something and people that helps you as workers. But that's the way it is seen, as people that helps you, not exactly a worker. It's your business associate. He's giving you his time, his life, whatever on his day to support your endeavor in business. That's the way Coparmex envisions things. So it's a very social concern business association. And that's why I got in town. I guess that the best of my political thinking came from Coparmex. Actually, when I was pushing Coparmex to be more active because we had a lot of problems with the feudal government and all of these bureaucracies and things, that's when I began kind of feeling, hey, maybe Rufo got something on his blood from his grandfather or something, because I was roaming against the current, trying to have a Coparmex national president to confront the government. And then the head leader at that moment of Coparmex said, hey, Rufo, you are moving us to something heavier than what we want, so you are going to make in risk the organization. And that's when my mind decided, oh, I gotta be in politics. I'm doing harm here. I gotta go to something that is more towards moving political purpose. And that's a political party. And I began thinking on PAN. That's how I got sympathy and things.
I know I was interviewing some prominent leaders at that same time you were the head of Coparmex in Ensenada, and I ran into those differences of opinion where some people were scared to be more active and others were taking your point of view and trying to push that organization and other business organizations to become more conscious of that. Unlike many members of PAN from your generation, including President Calderon, you didn't hold party positions before you ran for office. In fact, you only joined PAN a year before you ran for mayor. When you decided to run for governor of Baja California in 1989, at a time when no one from any other party other than the Institutional Revolutionary Party had become a state governor in the last 60 years, did you actually believe you could win the election? And did you introduce any changes in how you conducted your campaign?
Well, we are all a product of our own circumstance. I was always pushing for my friends, the students, or my friends, the fishermen. We were challenging the status quo from government, the feudal style. So, doing that, and then also I remember this situation within the company of American and Mexican leadership, the owners, were having some kind of conflict because the way of doing things, cultural things. And my training, I guess, Monterrey Tech, more open to the north, I was pretty much identifying with the American way of doing things. So I was at a moment kind of a troublemaker in the company also. So I said, maybe it's time to step out from the company, and the American side would not let me out. They gave me everything, training on finance, on hydraulics, on engines. So I was very grateful for that, but I wanted to not make more waves into the operation of the company. So I said, okay, I'll run for, the Americans won't say no to me leaving the company for doing this political thing in the city. And it worked. And I said, I'm not gonna win because the PRI never lets you win in the mayoral race. My surprise is that I won. and that's when I asked how much the mayor was making.
Not that much, right?
I was making $5,000 in the in the fishing company, and the mayor was making $650. I said, no, this is not a good business. I said, okay, 3 years, because that's the term. But two of the councilmen were entrepreneur origin persons. They had their business, so they donated to my salary. So I almost made $2,000, but still lagging. And I said, oh boy, well, this is not good. But okay, this is 3 years. And I'm very much people-minded. So I was doing things. The governor, PRI governor at that moment would not like me. He began kind of stalling tax transfers revenue. So I had to go out on talking to people in order to have cooperation and do a little bit better on property tax and things. But then the union made me strike. There was no garbage collection, so, and people was going into the mayor's office in order to ask for things because there is a lot of poor people. And I said, oh boy, I'm trapped here. So I decided to go pick up the garbage. And that made an enormous political impact.
When you campaigned for governor in 1989, many people talked about your campaign style and they referred to it as Rufismo. Could you explain what Rufismo meant, how you understood what journalists were saying?
Well, it's a movement, a social way of this explosion of participation in this civic interest for the community. It was because you were challenging government, but you were doing it in a very light and constructive way. This kind of inspired people. And so I was collecting the garbage and people was pulling out from the houses and helping me move the trash cans, and then ladies began sweeping the sidewalks and painting red wherever the car could not park, and it was then a movement thing, and this social thing got the name of Rufismo. Yeah, it happened that way. So I was not really aiming for that. It happened. Well, it makes me recall when one of these days by Easter, when the Americans have the beginning of classes, a lot of them spring break.
Yeah.
They came to Huson's, the cantina, the one that I just talked about. Okay, I was the mayor, and so well, there were so many that they were spilling over the street. So suddenly I had to close up the street because everybody was drinking on the street. But then it got rowdy. So I had to bring the firemen with the water hose and get everybody calmed down. So like, I don't know, like 200 American students got into the local jail. So I needed people to support me to collect garbage, and I said, oh, I know where I'm gonna get some some volunteers, because I'm gonna give them less time. But when they learned that I was the mayor collecting, everybody wanted to take a picture. I mean, and help, and so I got 200 volunteers suddenly. Things like that happen, but I guess it's being constructive, open, not really trying to be aggressive to anyone else. It's just trying to be orderly. And so all of that was happening, but I was making just $2,000, and I'm in stress because there is so much need. I remember when I was getting out of office in the evening, I had to make a stop sign and turn my head this way, and then it would, you know, make a noise in my neck because of stress. So I said, I'm not gonna do more of this. I mean, this is too much. But I had a friend, a newspaperman from Tijuana. He would support me when Carnival, Mardi Gras. He was on the cultural side and things. He had some, I don't know, situations in Tijuana on his column, and he got killed. So I went on to his funeral in Tijuana. But then I learned that he was talking about persons in the PRI government, and he had enemies. Well, when I got out of the funeral house, there was a lot of people, I don't know, 6,000, 7,000. And they said, talk to us. I was the only authority that got into the funeral house. And I said, hey, guys, this is a funeral. This is not a political, talk to us. Okay. I don't know what I said, But when I stepped down from the microphone, I knew I had the heart of Tijuana with me.
During your campaign, since you were challenging the PRI that had never lost a gubernatorial election in 60 years, did you have this feeling that you were sort of like David confronting Goliath?
Oh, yes. Well, I mean, there were cartoons depicting that.
Really?
Yeah, me with the stone going like that. There was very much of that. Maybe that's kind of the romanticism behind Rufismo, that you were challenging the impossible. But I was not thinking it was impossible. I was just, I think, riding the feeling, the meaning circumstance. People was emotional, interested, and they were willing to organize. I do remember that, the situation in the funeral house happened, but I knew that Tijuana was a much bigger city, and it had to be organized. The PAN was not that well organized. Actually, it was more kind of a representative party with a lot of history against government in Baja California, but needed more presence. So I said, I need organized people and I need able people. So I remember my friends from the student association in Monterrey. And I said, those guys know how to deal with the computer. So I went on talking to them and said, hey guys, and said, yeah, let's do it. I said, okay, but I need like 150 of you because the city of Tijuana is big. And they said, okay, we'll do that. We'll call you. Maybe 2 weeks later, I came and there were 250 people able to manipulate the computer. So that's it. I mean, we got organized, and then it spilled over to Mexicali, the capital city, and it was about people about my age, maybe younger than me. At that moment, I was 36, 37, and these engineers and professionals were 27, 28. But I recruited a lot of them, and that was the way of organizing. The biggest fear for me was winning and the government stealing the votes. And that made me to be very worried, and with scrutiny I did organize the ballot day. Actually, I was going into meeting places, and people was always, hey, my street, but hey, before we begin talking about your needs, are you going to help me keeping the poll box? Because if you want me to support your street, we need to win the election. And people would understand that, and then the day of election day, oh boy, there was a big army. And that was, I think that's why it happened to me, that I was the first one. I guess I was the first one to organize better because the government machinery and the PRI was every place, but you could not really confront reality and media, because media helped me very much, the Mexican media and the international media, a lot of Americans. I learned about, at that time, you know, the cameras were this big. Yes. Videotape was the V8 or something. It was a big cartridge like that. And we tell people, hey, take your camera and take shots. Oh, I don't have money, I don't have battery, I don't care. You just carry the camera and look like you're doing it, because these bad guys will get scared with the camera. And it worked. Well, anyhow, I got recognition of government, not without struggle, but then I decided that the most important thing was to make a clean, transparent electoral system in Baja. And we enacted. And we made ballot registry and cards with photographs. I remember this American company, Polaroid, a lot of to take the pictures and incorporate security devices and things. And that's what it is today. 2017, it's a national thing, and it came from Baja, from this experience.
Just a quick follow-up question. I know about that same time you became an advisor to the National Pond Committee. All these experiences that you just talked about, did you make recommendations to them, especially after you won the election and was recognized, to do some of these things in other campaigns throughout Mexico because of the success that you had with various techniques and wonderful organization, obviously?
Well, yes, of course, because I always been open. I remember President Salinas. He was the one along when I was the governor. And he was kind of skirmishing my advances, but I began involving academy, universities, political parties as well as mine. So it was pretty difficult for him to control anymore the situation, and he was the first to recognize that the electoral system that we had devised in Baja was to be incorporated into Mexico. Moreover, it was cheaper, even though the Mexican central system did not have pictures. So yeah, I kind of began being an advisor. Then the PM began winning other state governments, and I kind of made the university, because my personnel, my corporate structures, I mean, my people in government, I began sending them kind of trainers for the other governments. So it was a spillover with a pretty big influence, but we began suffering a problem in the PAN. Before PAN was winning, there was very few panistas. So it was kind of, you were always just being a figure against government, but not many follow-up. When we make victory, then a lot of people comes, and they want to incorporate in PAN. As I said, Mexico is a country where there is more people than opportunity. So many saw that as a way to drive onto opportunity. So then the quiet and easy and honorable PAN began having problems, because then internal interest first, maybe competition amongst panistas, then it began making tricks and even ballot problems inside the PAN, because we were too many and not so many posts. I guess the history of Mexico is that of scarcity, poverty, lack of opportunity, and our challenge to make a straight line. I mean, like when you wait in line and respect the line, I mean, which is rules, recognize your history, your accomplishments, your merits, not your friends or the influence of someone that comes and talks on your behalf. No, it's about your work. Mexico is moving that way onto the orderly fashion. That's why all of these political changes, it's a political evolution. It won't happen in an instantaneous way. But I guess the times of Mexico have made me from a business person to a politician, because circumstance makes you.
As the first opposition governor in Mexico, you've faced unique experiences in your relationships with the federal government. I remember speaking with you about this many years ago in Austin. Can you describe some of the experiences you had as governor, given the state's dependence on federal funds, and how you were treated by federal agencies? And did future governors from the National Action Party ask your advice as they shared in these same experiences that you had previously? And from your own perspective, what impact do you believe you had on the democratic transition in the 1990s?
Well, Rod, it's happening now. After almost 27 years that have gone by since I won that election as governor, I think this phenomena of so many people pouring into the PAN and the groups, confronting each other because of positions in government, it's kind of now being absorbed and understood in the political activity within the PAN. Now they're beginning to ask me, but before that, they were fearing me. I tried to be the president of the PAN at national level, and there was reaction, there was stiffness against my person, because the central PAN began seeing me as a northerner, as an intruder that wanted to control the PAN. That was not my intent. I mean, the wave was moving me. I even did not think on actually planned on being the president of the PAN. This was 1996. It happened because PAN people from the north began pushing. The PAN from central Mexico were saying we were the barbaros from the north. Because there are cultural things. As I said, the north of Mexico is more open, more towards competitiveness, globalization, but central Mexico is more kind of the old hacienda, kind of the feudal thing. I have this ranch, I'll give you work, but you do behave and don't upraise your voice, because if you do that, you won't have your opportunity. So there is control. And when you see this coming from the north, maybe, so they kind of close the door. But now I'm a member of the National Executive Committee. I'm the head person commissioned to make the formal electoral registry of the PAN national-wide. So there is this kind of, okay, the victory wave came into the PAN and made us a lot of problem, but we're learning from it, and now we want to recuperate the institution or the institutional ways, and that's our challenge.
After you left the governorship of Baja California, President Vicente Fox appointed you to be the head coordinator for the northern border. Could you talk a little bit about that agency, what you tried to accomplish, and does it still exist?
Actually, that office doesn't exist anymore. President Fox appointed me to be his presidential coordinator for the federal government in the north because evident reason. I was pretty strong about the Border Governors Conference, meaning the 6 Mexican governors and the 4 American governors along the Colorado River or the Rio Bravo, Rio Grande, you call it. But there was 2 big things. 9/11, because then the U.S. imploded into the security situation. So the border was kind of closed, rhetorically talking. It was still operating, but there was no discussion with the U.S. authority because the U.S. authority, to my opinion, didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to react. Later in time, Homeland Security was organized, but that took the U.S. like 10 years. So I was sitting in my office as border coordinator, and I was not being heard by the American part. I remember I was working rather well before 9/11. I remember General Powell in the State Department, me talking with him about how to organize some things in the border. Then that ended. That didn't happen anymore. There was no communication. Fortunately, there has been no terrorists coming from the Mexican territory onto the U.S. I guess it's pretty difficult for an Arab person to be mixed into Mexicans because we spot them right away. The other was Arpaio, your sheriff, against migrants. He was so stiff, and his policy influenced so much the Arizona governors that it ruined the conference of the governors of the border. Still, since then, it has not reunited. We need to make an effort to reaccommodate that. But now, President Trump and his views, his rhetoric, is not helping either. Yes, we're seeing some important communication ways through senators like Mr. McCain. Then other senators, as well as the companion senator to Mr. McCain, his name goes off my mind right now, but the California senators, Texas congressmen, that is keeping the thing ongoing. I had the opportunity on visiting Washington by the end of January. Mr. Trump had just taken oath a week earlier. So I went on talking to U.S. senators, congressmen, governors, mayors. And what I read is that the political establishment of the U.S. was worried about what was going on with Mr. Trump. And I got the sense that the legislators were not to follow on Trump's politics. And that's why I reported back to Mexico. We now have a new ambassador in Washington, Mr. Jerónimo Gutiérrez. He's a former headman of the Nad Bank. I think we can, we always should bet on reconstructing, reorganizing, because we're neighbors and partners forever, so let's do that.
We believe that the most important achievement of the Peña Nieto administration to date was the Pact for Mexico, the agreement among presidents of the party and the President of Mexico in identifying the major issues that Mexico faced and what were the most likely solutions to those problems. Why do you believe the pact only lasted 14 months? Do you believe that it would be possible to negotiate such an agreement again in the future?
Well, the pacto, we call it in Spanish, it's about structural reform. I've been talking about the feudal ways in Mexico. we are coming from state-owned companies, a very socialistic way of envisioning life. We are kind of thawing out from that, but it's been difficult to have that being supported from bottom up. So it had to get onto agreements from top down. And these agreements were done through partisan leadership, the PRI, the PAN, the PRD. They kind of negotiated this and made a list of things to be reformed. But corruption, it's a shameful thing, but this very government of Mexico today is drowned in corruption. This is something not to be scared of, coming from that when we had the revolution, there were so many generals. Everybody was killing each other. There was not really political philosophy. It was because we had another general, General Diaz, that was very much in control of the country, pretty stiff, was making progress, but was not really reaching the lower parts of people. I mean, with the ones with a lot of lack of opportunity. So revolution broke out, and it was kind of saying, you get away because we want in. That was the philosophy. Y just quítate tú para ponerme yo, but no more. So when the revolution came successful, then a lot of generals had to kind of organize themselves to say, okay, how are we going to make this work? And corruption appeared, which is, okay, you just settle your guns, we'll give you a rancho, or you know, a concession, or we'll let your family have this business. That was the philosophy. How to appease Mexico? It was through, okay, I'm going to give you this, I'll give you that, so we all get something. But that's the germ of corruption. And so the years since 1917, when the new constitution was enacted, kind of that was the oil of the political system. Now we are 100 years away from that, and the machinery has grown. You need much more oil, and the proportional government is too big. That is something that has broken public finance. The Mexican economy, it's very strong in the sense that it keeps moving. It can grow very much. I would not be surprised that we make 6-8% growth rates if government would let us. But the political machine is so big. So all of this pack is lacking popularity, because you see things happening within this structural change, but opportunity is not flowing down. Still being kept about the big traditional companies in Mexico, the friends of the president. Even the president is under some scrutiny for transparency. Oh boy, we have presidential election in 2018. This is going to be crucial.
You've had a successful political career in Baja California and now in the Senate. You've been a part of creating the critical creation of electoral democracy here in Mexico. But yet there's been a decline in popular attitudes about federal legitimacy. Could you discuss that with us?
Well, corruption. I mean, you believe someone when you see transparency, you kind of see the eyes of the other person in front of you, and then you see a track of action and you trust. This is the lack on the Mexican government history, worsening every next year. So that's why something is coming. But yes, you're right. We have electoral democracy. That's an achievement because we have an electoral system. All of the debate today is about who's going to win the election. So that means that there is an electoral process that is respected, although everybody tampers with it because there is people that is using public resources to make campaigns, but some other money is not from public sources. You can have support from the private part, but sometimes the money coming is not transparent. So in some cases, you have say that organized crime has broken through the system and has made electoral participation. But, well, I guess what I'm saying is the electoral process is the way to make decisions. That there are many guys doing tricks or bad operations to dominate an election process. It's happening, it's not generalized, but it happens in some regions of the country, and we need to overcome that. But yes, many years ago, you had to be a friend of the general or the president. Today, you must win the election.
In 2000, preparing for the election, a number of journalists suggested that the logical candidate for the PAN party presidential nomination was you. And now today, as we prepare for another presidential election, there are a number of journalists who are already saying that you're a pre-candidate for the nomination and a likely winner in the next presidential election. Could you talk about the presidency and the opportunities that presents?
Well, what I can say to that is, I guess that's a consequence of you being always present. I never have lowered the flag of being a citizen, have civic responsibility, but I never have entangled in pacts or compromise. I say what I think, what I believe, but I don't buy out by trading posts or things. I just keep moving and let circumstance make the wave. That's how Rufismo made it. But Mexico still is very much of compromise, agreements, and it happens within the PAN. We're Mexicans, after all. The PAN is made out of needy Mexicans, many others very much enlightened by purpose, because there is a political philosophy in PAN, which is human dignity, the human rights, the person to be the center of everything. And so they see my trajectory, and so if you by analysis try to make a forecast, then you see Ruffo. But I'm not a man of compromising things for just obtaining a post. I want transparency, and if I make it, it's fine, and if not, I'll keep moving.
Do you think, and Mexicans in general, the survey research confirms your view that corruption and crime and violence are serious issues with ordinary citizens. Do you think Mexico has failed to address these issues adequately because it's the lack of the government's ability to overcome serious obstacles, or does it have more to do with it passes good legislation, but that legislation is never fully implemented? Is it a problem of not applying the policies, even good policies that most decision makers agree would be beneficial to Mexico?
Well, my way of viewing this is reality. Maybe I should have been a person of social studies or something like that, because I stick to my view of opportunity. In Mexico, you have less opportunity than people, so you live in a feudal reality. You're fighting each other to obtain something. And that makes a struggle. The institution is not number one. The strong man is number one. So loyalty to a strong man is your future. We're trying to advance that and have Mexico to be one of institutions. Institutions are made out of norm, and that's what makes an institution work. That's law. Law is a very modern thing because it makes a community, a nation, work through law. When you're working about from strong men, then maybe he be a nice man or an ogre. You're depending on personality. You have nothing but a strong man. Mexico is moving from that tradition, which is, I guess, humanity's history. Many of the world's cultures are made through this, the association of these strong men to religion, because they say, God put me over here, which is all lies. It's just that they want to have blessings to their sword. Humanity is moving from there, and Mexico began later than the Europeans. The US was made out of Europeans running from the king. Guess what? We're doing the same. But we started from a more difficult starting point, because your immigrants had all this cultural experience from Europe. Ours were natives. In other, their guns, well, there were no guns, there were just sticks with stones. The Spaniards were coming with fire guns. So we had a lot to absorb. So I guess I'm answering you in a social way of interpreting things. We still got a lot to go. The institutional way, no doubt, is the way to do it. We have settled for electoral processes. Now we need the mind of many to accept, to respect the law. And if I become the president, I gotta make more opportunity than people. Because in that way, you change like that. It's my own experience. When I go across the border to the US, I'm different. Why do you think that is? Because there is a lot of opportunity. And people respect the law. In Mexico, there is a very, very big difficulty to have institutions being respected. So we got to work a lot on that.
And now if we could shift away from politics, and if I could ask you a question as a representative of Ensenada, the fishing industry, and the North. What is the secret to fish tacos?
Aunt Jemima. Meaning the flour from the hot cakes, we found a way on how to mix it so we can batter the fish, which actually is mainly shark meat. The tortilla, corn tortilla, and the different ingredients you want to put on. Oh boy, I like mustard. And so